Well, welcome back to another in my local author series, and you can't get more local than Ben Gonshor. Really a pleasure to have him. The Book of Izzy is Ben's debut literary novel. One night, a few weeks ago, I sat down to begin reading his book, and folks, it was way past my bedtime when I finished. Ben, congratulations. A fabulous book. I binge read it in one night, and then I read parts of it again when I was starting to write up my reviews and prepare my questions for you. So first off, Ben, Izzy is a writer who has found himself in a series of downward spirals between his recently failed love life, his faltering career as both a wedding planner and a novelist, and an ever-looming mental breakdown. So my first question is, how did you come up with the character of Izzy?
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me. And thanks for the question and the questions that are coming. Um, I think I came up with the character Izzy uh, after considering um, the topic that I wanted to write about and what would be the best way to do that. I ended up realizing after reviewing different types of books that were written from the first person narrator perspective that it was an approach that I wanted to tell my story or the story that I wanted to tell, not necessarily my personal story. And so in conceiving the story, I ended up coming up with a protagonist that I felt would be strong enough to carry the narrative. And that's how I came up with the character of Izzy, who's the protagonist of the book.
So the question I have when I read a book, and I read a few of them lately where I know it's not Ben Gonshor, but I don't know, even though you're much older than Izzy had said to me off air is about in his 30s probably. Is there a Ben in Izzy or an Izzy in Ben?
Yeah, I think the short answer is yes. And I think most writers would tell you that, there's a piece of them in every character that they write. Otherwise, how can they write the character, particularly in long form literature that you need to stick with for a long time? If you're not in somehow engaged with um, the character, I don't know how you can do them justice. So I'd say that, there's a little bit of me in there for sure.
So the book picks up with Izzy as he's decided to take himself off his meds, and against the expert opinion of his psychiatrist who diagnosed him. Um, where did that all come from? That concept?
Um, there's a theme that runs through the book that you're aware of because you've read it. It's the theme of the bird, right?
Yeah,
That I won't divulge because obviously we want people to read the book and discover for themselves. Um, but Izzy hallucinates that he sees this this bird,
yeah.
right? And I felt that your average person doesn't hallucinate, you know, uh, on a regular basis, let alone see birds that talk to them. So in order to get that across, I felt that Izzy would need to be dealing with some kind of mental crisis that would make it sort of legitimate that he might be hallucinating.
Okay.
That's where the mental health crisis comes from. In order to make the concept of this bird that he's hallucinating
Right,
seem more logical.
right. So as a playwright and an actor, which you're both, um, why did you choose to make this into a novel instead of a play?
Good question. At the time that I started thinking about writing this project, I had just come off winning a playwriting award in New York for my play When Blood Ran Red. And I was thinking about what the next project would be that I would want to work on. And when I settled on what the project would be, I recognize that both in scope and certainly for the scope, let me just address that. I didn't think that the medium of a play or a screenplay would be the appropriate medium. So for scope, I realized that long form literature was probably the medium that it needed to be.
Right.
And yeah, I'd also grown frustrated in certain ways that some of the works that I was writing for film and theater were not getting produced. And so I wanted to find a medium that I would have more control over. And with literary fiction, I knew that at the very least, though it was never my goal, I could always self-publish whatever I would write, no matter what. No matter what would happen if I couldn't find a publisher or an agent or what have you, I could always throw the material up on the internet and get an audience. It was never the goal, as I said. But so that was the reason, both for scope and for practical reasons, that I settled on the novel.
Okay. In reading, Yiddish theater, I mean, we know all about Yiddish theater in Montreal, and the main character is Luba. I loved that character. I loved the way you described her mannerisms and everything she did. But as I read it, I started thinking, is Luba Dora Wasserman? Tell me if there's any similarities between Dora, who you knew very well, who was a legend in Yiddish theater in this city, and Luba.
Again, the short answer is yes.
Huh.
I took inspiration from many parts of my life in writing characters, storylines, themes that you'll find in the book. And when it comes to some of the characters, certainly people that I've interacted with over my life informed who I decided to create. And I think Luba is an amalgam of people that I encountered in the Yiddish theater, most predominantly would be Dora Wasserman.
Okay. Yeah. Describe people will really read the book, especially anyone who's involved in Yiddish theater will really appreciate that character. So I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. The Dybbuk,
The Dybbuk.
the Dybbuk. Okay, it's okay. So how did you choose that as the touchstone for the Book of Izzy, and how is the experiences of playing the lead character? How inspire you in terms of writing that part? Like you chose that. You've been in that play in the past, right? In real life.
I have 2 times.
And maybe you could explain to the viewer what the plot line is in that play to begin with. It's from a long time ago.
Certainly. It's probably the greatest play in Yiddish theater, also in Hebrew theater. We're talking about Yiddish theater. It's Romeo and Juliet in Yiddish. It's a love story between two people who don't know it, but were actually predestined to be together. Their fathers, who were together in a yeshiva when they were younger, made a pact that should they get married and should they have children, and should one be a son, one be a daughter, they would betroth them to one another. Life happens, and for whatever reason, that doesn't work out. But the youngsters actually end up meeting, and they end up falling in love. And the father of the young woman, whose name is Leah, betroths her to somebody else. And the young man, the male character Cohen, tries to find a way to break up the marriage, doesn't succeed, and dies. But before he dies, he has a revelation, and he says, "I have won." And over the course of the play, The Dybbuk, we see what that means for him to have won. The play ends up tragically, but in some ways romantically, and as it should. I fell in love with the play from the moment I encountered it many years ago. It had a profound impact on me, not only for the fact that it's a great play, and as somebody who's a child of the theater, that meant a lot to me to know that in our Yiddish theater, we had something that literally was world class. And so I engaged with it immediately on a very visceral level. The actual title of the play is called the Dybbuk, or Between Two Worlds. And there's a reason for that, which people who I
Yeah.
would highly recommend engage with the play will understand what the two worlds are. It really
Mhm.
is this world and the next world,
Right.
the rational world and the mystical world. But it also deals with the present and the past being between two worlds, which the playwright Anski, I believe himself felt himself to be, as a man who was of the modern world and was seeing it eclipse the traditional world and very much wanted to preserve that world for the future. And that's another thing that I really engage with profoundly, this idea of being between two worlds, both of this world and another one. And
Mhm.
as the grandchild of Holocaust survivors, the idea of somehow being connected to the old world that was destroyed has been with me throughout my life. So I wanted to have some kind of scaffold to hang my narrative on. And the thought of doing that with the Dybbuk was very interesting to me. And I hope that people who read the book will find not just what I wrote fascinating, but will, who have not engaged with the Dybbuk previously, will be fascinated by this play and want to investigate it further.
Yeah, I think that's very well explained. So the book uses a lot of Yiddish words and turns of phrases. So how did you address the concerns that this might be confusing to like the non-Jewish readers while remaining like authentic to the vision that you had for this book? Because I mean, I was familiar with the terms, but not everybody will be.
True. Um, I wanted Izzy to speak authentically, and I believe
Yeah.
Izzy's mother tongue to be Yiddish, and he peppers his phrases with Yiddish turns of phrase. And I could have translated into English, uh, but it always sounds better in Yiddish.
Yeah.
So the way I handled that was I created a glossary.
Hmm.
I created footnotes at the bottom of pages where I use Yiddish, but I did it in what I hope is an entertaining way that doesn't take people out of the read itself, but that makes it a more complete experience. And I hope that I succeeded where that's concerned.
Izzy is very open about his experiences with anxiety and depression. And in the promotion of the book, it's shared with journalists that you have gone through some difficult times in your life as well. Um, it's helpful, I think, for people. I think everyone can relate, right? Anyone who's reading it, they either have experienced it themselves, they know someone who's done it. It's life. And how important was that for you to share in this book?
Very. I wanted to look. I thought it would be an interesting dramatic device, and I hope that works. But I also wanted to share my own experience of going through periods of depression and anxiety, and also the experience of dealing with psychotropic medications, which I don't think gets talked about a lot.
Mhm.
But the great thing is we're living through a time now where talking about mental health is front and center
Yes.
and seen in a positive light, which is wonderful. One thing that I don't think we talk about enough is the experience of living on and off medications. And when I say on and off, most of the time or frequently, people who are put on medications are on medications that don't work and they have to try something else. And I wanted to share my experience so that we can talk about it of what the on and off experience is like, which in
Yes.
and of itself can be as traumatic as the underlying disease itself, which again, I don't think we talk about enough. And I just wanted to put it out there so that we can have a conversation about it. I think
Yeah.
the more we talk about that, uh, I hope the more helpful it'll be to society.
You're right. And, no, I enjoyed every bit of the book, but I really I really enjoyed the romance. You had a very unique romantic relationship Izzy had in the book, and the reader really has to read to the end to get to some interesting twists in that relationship.
Yeah. I wanted a love story because it's something I wanted to write. I had a good time with that. And what I like about the love story is it's not just about uh, Izzy and the character Sue-Ann falling for one another, but it's really about what Izzy's encounter with Sue-Ann requires of him to take on,
Mm-hmm.
uh, the way she challenges him to look at some preconceived notions he has about romance, about life, about Jewish identity. And it's through that experience of the love story and engaging with Sue-Ann that he has to come to terms with a lot of things that he uh, simply has not wanted to.
Yeah,
And she brings that out of him in ways that I think are not just entertaining, but I think that are profound and hopefully people can relate to.
for sure. So Ben, tell us, you're going to have a launch for this book. When's that coming up, and how can people get copies of the book?
Great. Thanks for asking, Mike. The launch is going to be on Tuesday, May 14th at the Museum of Jewish Montreal, 7 o'clock. It's open to the public, but you have to register in advance. So you can go on um, the Museum of Jewish Montreal website
Okay.
to find the link to RSVP. Um, and people can find the book on Amazon.
Okay. And will it be available in local bookstores as well? It's a nice hard copy, a nice
It's
looking book.
we're going to be selling Bibliophile Bookstore on Queen Mary will be selling books
Perfect.
at the launch,
All
and
right.
it will also be available for sale at the bookstore. So for people who live in Montreal, I would encourage you to support your local businesses and go to Bibliophile and buy the book there, which will be available as of May 14th.
Just in time for the nice summer weather to sit outside and read a great book written by Ben Gonshor. So Ben, thank you very much for spending the time with me today. Good luck with this book, and I look forward to the movie.
Thanks, Mike.
All right. Ben Gonshor has been my guest.